I'm Anna. This is Pilates. Today we're going to do kind of a propless class. Of course, you can always add stuff in, right? So for comfort, kneeling pad, towel under the knees, maybe towel under the head. You're always welcome to do the hack where you just fold your mat, which is a great strategy. If you want to add any extra like inner thigh feedback, if you've got a ball or a yoga block, rolled up towel works too, water, and then you always have the option to add some small weights if you're like, really want to get crushed today, then good shoulder stabilization. Our theme is, I think, core today is kind of the big theme. We'll do some abs and some hips, but we'll start with a little standing warm up here. So we'll come to standing, guys. Let's do a little wrist stretch because we will do some stuff on our hands today. So you just want to make sure that you've got your finger pads and the outside edge of your heel of your hand connected. So it's okay if you can't go totally flat. And then easy shoulders, kind of roll them up and back. We're just going to push one wrist towards the same side shoulder. And you might get a little stretch here. And if you want more, you can press a little bit more. So you can kind of extend that wrist position. Let me know if you don't feel a stretch. And we'll just move back and forth. And you don't have to match my timing. This is a nice one if you do a lot of computering or driving, pretty much anything that we do every day. And you'll know kind of when you hit the limit if your shoulder starts to pop up or the elbow starts to lift. So we're just looking for a nice, easy movement from side to side, a little gentle stretch through the wrists and the forearm. Yeah, and we'll try one more like this. And then you can bring your hands together and clasp your hands, and we'll just take a couple figure eights. You can just let your elbows rest on your side, just kind of gently noticing how's the range of motion, right? We don't want to force anything, but just kind of being aware if you've got some limitations, if you notice one wrist is feeling a little stiffer than the other, and then let's reverse it. And you can start to touch in with your breath, right? So breath is technically like the first principle of Pilates, so we want to encourage breathing. And a lot of us tend to breathe when we're stressed out, right? In the shoulders and the upper chest, or belly breath, which is really great. Belly breath is awesome for like regular life. Starting to breathe into the back and the sides of the rib cage. So really using all of that real estate. And then we'll shake it out here. And then step a little bit wider. We're just going to do some easy rotation. So you can let everything rotate. So it's my ankles, my knees, my hips, ribs, shoulders, and head. And then kind of notice that your eyes can also give you a little bit more access to rotation in your upper chest and your cervical spine. Really good way to warm up. So if you're like going to go on a jog and you only have like 5 minutes to warm up, doing some nice active rotation to get all your joints moving. Try one more each way. And then are you still breathing? Hopefully the answer is yes. And then let's take our feet a little bit closer together. We're just going to do a side stretch. So side stretch rather than side bend. So don't think collapse, but think of really reaching up. So I've got my right arm reaching to the ceiling. I'm reaching, and I'm trying to stretch the fascia from my shoulder all the way down to my hip. If you want a little bit more, you can bend the opposite knee. Yeah, and eventually it kind of side bends, right? But we're putting a little bit more energy into the stretch side, and we'll switch here. So it's reaching up. Really think about lifting the rib cage off of the hips. And then if you want a little more, you can bend. Depending on how this feels on the neck, you're welcome to also let the ear drop. Right, maybe kind of tucking the chin just gently. You can also turn to look down if this doesn't feel great in the neck. And we'll do one more like this on each side. And we're gonna add a little calf stretch to this next round. So I'll step my right leg back. Toes and knee and hip are gonna be forward. And then I'm gonna add that same side reach. So thinking up first and then over. And hopefully you're getting a little bit more of a stretch now kind of through the front of the body. You can always hold on to something if it's feeling a little bit challenging to balance, and we'll switch sides. So again, check out really, sometimes we feel like we're square and we kind of end up in this warrior two position. So see if you can keep the toes pointing forward, a little bit of pressure through that front heel to get your glute and hamstring to stabilize. We'll do one more each way. How's the breath? If you like to pop your ribs, right, coming into kind of an extension, see if you can soften the ribs. And you might find you actually get a little different stretch than you're used to getting. Maybe a little bit more through the hip and through the low back. And we'll do one more here, evening ourselves out. And I think especially in your warm up, so like opening movements and mobilizations, it's okay to explore. It doesn't have to be really stiff and rigid. You might find you need something different on each side. Nice. All right, we'll do a couple of roll downs. So I'll come to the back of our mat. And feet about hip distance, maybe closer together if you want a little bit more of a challenge in your balance. We're just gonna nod the chin to the chest, let the top of the head rotate, let your arms dangle here, and then rolling all the way down so you can get the crown of your head all the way towards the mat. Bending the knees if you need, right? Relaxing the back of the neck. So sometimes we like to look up, see if you can really relax your skull. Take a nice breath in and then push through your feet. Scoop your abs and drag your spine all the way back up. And we'll just do a nice little reach up. Just think of kind of lifting the ribs off of the hips. And then we'll do that again. So as I go back, notice sometimes our body's smart, right? So it's gonna try to offset the work by sending our hips back. See if you can keep your hips stacked over your feet. So it means I have to curl quite a bit more and my legs have to turn on a little bit more. And maybe that means we have to bend the legs. If you're at the bottom and you notice that your knees are locked, see if you can shift your weight forward. And notice that you actually get a little bit more rotation out of your hip joint. So a little bit more access to your hamstrings. And then pushing and rolling up when you're ready. And again, kind of resisting gravity. It wants to compress us down. So seeing if you can find some space there. For this last one, we'll roll all the way down and we'll actually walk out into our hands and knees. Really relaxing the back of the neck here. And then if you need to do any kneeling pad kind of choreography here, you can throw that in. We're gonna find our way to our hands and knees. So wrists are stacked underneath our shoulders, right? Just watching for internal rotation. So think fingers forward or maybe even a little bit externally rotated, like you're screwing the jar lid of a jar away from center. We're just gonna take 3 rounds of cat-cow. So spinal movement. Scooping my abs in, I'm pushing out of the ground. You're gonna gaze towards your thighs. Easy breath in here. And then with support, just opening the sits bones back and extending the chest forward. So I'm still really pressing out of the ground and keeping my core lifted. We'll do 2 more like this. So there's shoulder blade movement going on here, pelvis movement, spinal movement, right? And we're coordinating all of these components. And I want you to really notice how much your pelvis is moving and initiating in this versus how much your maybe low back is doing. So the spine's gonna follow, but it's not gonna initiate this movement. And you'll notice in your extension in particular, if you feel like you can get a lot more, but it's really the low back sinking, see if you can lift your abs up like you're gonna hold your organs in and then find your extension through your tailbone. We're gonna come to center here. So tailbone reaching away from the crown of the head. We're gonna take just a couple scap isolations. So I'm gonna let my chest fall through my arms, my shoulder blades come together, my elbows are straight, and then I'm gonna push out of my arms, a little protraction. So those butterfly bones on your back are reaching towards the spine, kind of towards that racer back line of your sports bra, and then you're exhaling to push away. And we wanna mobilize this in particular when we have low back or neck tension or pain. Sometimes these guys aren't moving or stabilizing as much as we want. Try one more like this. We're gonna practice a 1-arm version. So you're gonna stabilize through your right hand. You're gonna reach your left fingertips out to the side and your palms facing down. So I'm already kind of working, right? Definitely some oblique work, not to rotate my spine. I'm gonna plug my shoulder blade towards my spine and float my arm up. And then I'm gonna lower it back down and tap. And we'll just try that 5 more times. So plugging first. So rather than the front of my shoulder driving the movement, I'm actually opening up the pec and using my shoulder blade retraction to get this movement. Now you're definitely still really pushing out of your supporting arm. So you start to feel like a little bit of work through your forearm and your tricep on that supporting arm side. You feel some work here? Because I can't count, let's try 1 more. It seems like 5. Yeah, nice. Then bring the arm back in. Little reset here. Notice if anything shifted. And then you're gonna sweep your right arm out to the side. Fingertips down here. So I'm pushing out of my supporting limbs. I'm gonna plug my shoulder blade in first to float the arm up and then lower back down. So isometric holds are the hardest, right? Which is what's happening with that left arm. So my finger pads are engaged. If you notice that you're sinking into the outside heel of the supporting hand, so you can find a little bit more weight through each of the finger pads so that you're not locking through that elbow joint. And you've got 2 more like this, plugging to open up the chest. Where your core is on, obliques are working even if you don't feel like you're having to necessarily fire them specifically. They're gonna keep you from rotating your torso. Nice. All right, we're gonna come down onto our right forearm. I'm still in my stack. So elbow's gonna be underneath my shoulder, and then I've got my left hand kind of just prepped here on the ground. I'm gonna sweep my left leg back. I'm gonna tap the leg down and sweep it up. And tap it down and sweep it up. So giving your shoulders a little bit of a break, getting that glute on. Try not to side bend to the right, but see if you can keep that length between your right shoulder and your right hip. Nice, and the next one, pause up. You're gonna bend that left knee in towards your elbow as close as you can get it, and then kick it back out and sweep it to the ceiling. Don't worry if it rotates a little bit. Bring it in and exhale to kick it out. Nice, so lots of core, even in movements that feel like they're pretty shoulder oriented. Kicking on our posterior chain is really valuable for posture balancing when we do a lot of stuff that's like front moving. So driving, sitting. Nice, and then come back down. Take 3 rounds of your side bend cat-cow. So I'm just gonna go to the side looking towards my tail. One side shortens, one side lengthens. And then switching sides. We'll just keep it nice and movey, flowy here. We'll do 2 more sets like that. Exploring that side body, keeping the elbows nice and lengthened. Checking in with the breath here. And then we'll try the other side. So we'll come down onto the left forearm, still stacked under the shoulder, and then my right hand is on the ground. And I'm just gonna sweep that right leg back and then tap it down and float it up. Let's take a couple of these. So if you start to notice you're kind of leaning and collapsing, see if you can find a little bit more length between your left hip and your left shoulder. You're just opening up the front of that hip. If your knee wants to bend, see if you can keep it long and move from your hip joint instead. And then on the next one, keep it up. We're gonna try to bring that knee in as close as possible to the right elbow and then sweep it back up. And bringing it in, yep. If the back starts to drop, think about lifting your organs up towards your spine. It's like a little net that you're tightening so you don't start to arch through that low back. And you get one more like this. Nice, then bring that leg in. Reach your arms forward, take a nice little child's pose here for a moment. Let's keep it pretty active, so you're gonna push with your arms as you scoop your abs in and away from your thighs. Maybe you can tuck your chin and let your forehead rest on the ground. Try one more breath here. And then walking your hands back to your knees here. We'll start with a little half roll back. So you can sit on your bum. So for half roll back, we want to sit up as high as possible. So you might find that you have to adjust your legs a little bit further forward. I'm going to show with my feet flat, but you're welcome to flex the feet. So you're sitting up nice and tall here. We're going to start with hands on the thighs or knees. I'm going to roll back. So it's rolling back off my sits bones. My pelvis is essentially rotating. I'm only going to go to like the top of my pants at the very most. Arms will lengthen. Take a nice breath in. As you exhale, I'm going to curl up by crunching and rounding forward. Yeah, we'll just take a couple of those and don't feel like you have to move at my pace. You can go a little slower or a little faster. But the idea is rotation from the pelvis, right? Really important that we can separate our femurs and pelvis from one another. Good for hip health. When I come back up, it's the opposite. So instead of leading with my hips and kind of popping through my low back, I'm gonna curl, leading more with the top of my head. Like pelvis, back, ribs forward. If this is feeling easy, just float your arms out. So I'm just adding load here. So as soon as my arms are up, I've got more weight for my core to deal with. And if I want more still, I could do my hands on my shoulders. So I'm just kind of bringing the weight a little bit further back to make it harder. As you're rolling front and back, notice that you're evenly weighted on both sides of your pelvis. So right and left side are flipping at the same time. And generally, exhale is gonna be kind of your friend for any of the compression motions. So take a nice breath in at the bottom. Here I'm compressing, so I'm gonna exhale. Give myself a little bit more support. Let's just do one more like this. We're gonna do a lot of curling today. So reach your arms forward on this next one. We're gonna go back and pause. Maybe not your lowest, but just rolling off your sits bones a little bit here. Take a nice breath in. As you exhale, you're gonna sweep just your right arm out to the side. So keep your torso forward, keep your gaze forward, and then exhale to come back to center and try the other side. So same shoulder blade motion. So kind of notice here, we did that on the ground, so we had a little bit different feedback. It should feel like there's still an element of plugging and opening so that you almost get like a pec stretch as you reach that arm back, and you can feel like there's a little clasp through your shoulder blades, kind of. Think of like a snack bag clip or like a hair clip. And then we want to make sure we're not opening it so far that we start to arch through the low back. So maybe we just curl up a little bit higher, right? So less, I guess higher will be less load. And then you can roll all the way forward here. Okay, so now we're gonna do a little rolling like a ball. We haven't done that one in a while. So for rolling like a ball, this moment in our pelvis is pretty important, right? So two options here. You can hold your backs of your thighs. You can also hold towards your ankles. And if you're like super advanced and you're like, I don't need it, go hands free. But what we're looking for is rolling back, not onto the neck, but just the upper back, and then coming back up. And for the first couple, maybe the feet touch down, just to kind of get a sense of, I don't want to back flop, but I want to find a nice curled spine. Right, and rolling like a ball is really hard if we can't articulate the pelvis. So if my pelvis stays like this, I just back flop. So that's where that like a little initial movement needs to happen. Yeah, nice. And then maybe start balancing it. And I can really use my kind of arms against my legs, which is nice. I can find a good balance point at the top. And the idea is once this feels really, really good, we don't have to use as much momentum. So for like a really advanced rolling like a ball, it's actually my core that's initiating the roll back and my core that's curling me forward. So it's kind of like the less momentum. We'll try one more like this. Good for healthy spine movement. Nice. Okay, so keep your hands behind your thighs. You're gonna roll all the way back into like a little crunch position. I'm gonna keep my left hand and thigh connected. Rest your head if you need. I'm gonna keep my head up in my ab prep here. I'm in imprint, so my back's gonna stay against the mat. My right arm and right leg are gonna open out. And then they're gonna come back in and touch and then open out. Now I can really use my bicep and my left hamstring against each other. So my support side, it's like I'm really holding myself up on that left side here. Yeah, adjust how high or how low your leg is, right? So further away is gonna be a little bit more challenge. And exhaling as you extend out. Let's go for 3 more. I'm just kind of gazing, just right about knee, kind of inner thigh area. So on the next one, you're gonna keep your right leg out. Bring your hands behind your head. Now I'm gonna take a nice breath in. I'm gonna exhale, curl, try to touch my right elbow to my left knee, and then I'm gonna roll back down. Inhale and exhaling to curl, touch that right elbow to left knee. Now if I want a little more support, what can I do? I can reach my right leg up towards the ceiling. If I want a little more support still, I could put that right leg all the way down on the ground. All right, so if my low back feels like it's popping a lot, maybe I drop that leg. So you've got 3 options. Grab onto one of those. Try to touch that right elbow to the left thigh. Last one like this. And then rest your head down, pull your knees into your chest, give yourself a little squeeze for a moment. Feel some obliques?
Yeah, yes.
Nice. Okay, so I'm in my imprint. I'm gonna float my legs to tabletop, so that 90-degree position. So my imprint, right, I'm checking just to make sure I don't have a big arch under my back. So my obliques are drawing my ribs and hips together. So I'm kind of like buckling down. Not so much that I can't breathe, right? So always with kind of a grain of salt. So I'm gonna bring my arms out to a T. Squeeze your inner thighs together. Your left hip lifts as your knees go over to the right, only as far as you can keep your left shoulder down. Then you're gonna lift your top leg, squeeze your inner thighs together, and try the other side. So we don't want the knees to shift here. And so for the knees to not shift, I have to let my top hip lift, right? So if my top hip doesn't lift, you'll notice that my knees start to separate. So I'm giving it permission to move. And then opposite shoulder is gonna stay down on the mat. Exhaling to come back up. It doesn't have to be super far. If you feel like your low back is kind of getting wrenched in this, then I would keep it a lot smaller range of motion. And that's always a good strategy. Minimize your range of motion if it feels like you're straining. put more body parts on the ground if it feels like it's straining. Those are good strategies to kind of back off. All right, on this last one, we're gonna come back to center. So just refreshing that imprint, noticing that you haven't arched your back up off the floor. You're gonna grab the backs of your legs here and curl up. So same, but different. So I'm really using this right bicep against my right thigh as I open my left arm and leg. Exhaling and inhaling to come back in. Yeah, now if you wanna keep your head up, you're gonna keep it kind of gazing towards that knee. If you wanna lower the head down, you can lower the head the whole time. What I wanna point out is this isn't just neck flexion, but it's my core. So I'm actually lifting from my ribs. So if you find that it starts to turn into ribs are lengthened and neck is doing a lot of work, either refresh from your rib cage or just let the head rest for a little bit. And let's go for 2 more. Exhaling to extend, right? Adjust the height of that leg. Last one. We're gonna keep that leg out. Bring your hands behind your head. Take a nice breath in. You're gonna exhale, touch your left elbow to your right knee and lower the head and shoulders back down. Exhaling to curl up and twist. Now, as I curl and twist, right, remember you have options. You could reach that left leg up a little higher. You could set the left leg down on the ground, just kind of showing those really quickly. I wanna make sure my right elbow doesn't touch the ground. So if I'm leaning, I'm not actually working those abdominals as well as I could be. And let's do 2 more here. And last one, supporting the head here as you lift. And then gently lower your head and shoulders down and you can grab those legs in again. Take a couple circles in your low back. And then reversing here. So we'll do a little hip extension before we do some more core. I did say core was the theme. As promised. Someone had coffee this morning. So we'll bring our feet together. So in our kind of butterfly pose, now what I want you to notice is where's your full max position, right? Kind of nice and relaxed, feels good. I want you to come up by pushing the soles of the feet together to bring your knees in maybe about shoulder distance, like think 45 degrees. So we're not working in our end range of motion, but I want you to feel like you could still come into an imprint if you needed to. And then when you're ready, arms down or up to the ceiling, we're gonna take a couple shoulder bridge. So I'm gonna peel to lift my hips up, watching we don't come too high into the ribs, and then lengthen and lower back down. So it's gonna feel a little less climactic, I think. It's not quite as high as our shoulder bridge when we're in parallel. So just kind of remind yourself it's all about hip extension versus rib cage extension. The more you squeeze towards your midline, and you could always do this on a ball if the feet don't really love being in this position, that can take some of the pressure off. We'll take one more like this. And then when you roll down, so if you can keep that squeeze, reach your hands behind your head, clasp your fingers. So supporting the head, we're gonna take a couple crunches here in your imprint. So find your bum, right? So notice again, if it kind of falls into relaxation, the muscles aren't on around to support the hip. So float up a little bit by pressing your feet together. And then when you're ready, you're gonna nod your chin, exhale to lift, and inhale to lower. Yeah, so just some little crunches here in external rotation. So notice if the thighs want to like kind of fall in and out a little bit. So there might be a little bit of instability as you press. So just see if you can keep them nice and stable. And nodding the chin before you lift the head off the ground is going to give you a little bit more neck support. Elbows definitely don't have to be super wide, especially if you find your shoulders are pretty tight. And when we finish in our crunches, I know a lot of times we have people cue to look to the ceiling. I want you to look more in front of you, like off into the distance. So kind of thinking of passing over where your knees would be in parallel is gonna be a little nicer for our neck position. Get one more like this. Then rest your head down. Come back into your imprint position. So my ribs and hips are drawing towards one another. I'm gonna lift my heels, pull my toes in towards my hips, and then float my legs to turned out tabletop. Turned out tabletop. So from here, we're gonna do a toe tap. So I'm gonna exhale, keeping my back against the mat. So I wanna make sure I don't lose it. So if ribs pop, abs pop, or back pops, then I know I've lost my imprint. Maybe hands on the core just to kind of check in. I'm gonna exhale to tap my toes down. Maybe they touch the ground, maybe they just float. And then inhale to bring the legs back up. So we'll exhale and an inhale to come back up. Equally weighted through both sides, right? You can always challenge this by bringing the arms to the ceiling, maybe bringing the arms overhead. With arms overhead, we're definitely challenging the upper rib cage. So we have to give permission for the rib cage to lengthen, but we just want to make sure that we're not popping and losing that upper ab connection. And let's do one more like this. Nice, you can hug your knees wide, so grab one knee with each leg and just take a couple circles, bringing the knees together, pulling them apart. And then reverse it. And then let's roll to the side here. So I'm gonna come onto my right side. Whatever side is best for you to see me, we'll do both, I promise. And then supporting your bottom, or supporting your head with your bottom arm. So long, bent, if you've got a prop you wanna use, make sure that the neck feels like it's not already braced when you're in this position. So we're gonna be kind of in our casual clamshell position. So making sure you're not in a tuck. Take a couple pelvic curls and kind of check in. If my bum's curled under, I'm probably gonna use my hip flexors a lot. So see if you can find your tailbone reaching towards the bottom of the mat. Lift your bottom obliques. We're just gonna float that whole leg up and lower it back down. And as you're floating up and down, notice if up is this way. So we don't want to bring it towards our chest, but we want to think about if there was a line, my knee is going to trace and follow the line of my bottom leg. So I just want to make sure I'm not kind of crowding that top hip. You can always do hand on the top hip. If you activate your bottom obliques, that will kind of do the same thing. It's a nice little counter cue. Right hand on the ground for more support. Tactile feedback is awesome. Arm, just kind of get rid of it if you want to make it a little more challenging. Yeah. Nice. On the next one, we'll hold up. Find hip height. We're going to do some rotation. So keeping your hips steady. So notice my hip is going to stay still in space. My pelvis doesn't move. I'm going to turn my knee in and my foot goes up. And then I'm going to turn my knee out and my foot comes down. So maybe hand on the hip just to keep an eye on the movements happening just in the thigh rotation. And this one can be, and maybe kind of like check it out if you need to for a couple to be like, wait a second, how do I do this movement? Because usually one is easier than the other. And checking in with your tension. So if my core turns off, I'm much more likely to use neck or low back. So just a little check there. And let's do one more like this. And then you can lengthen that leg out, give a little stretch here. Before we go to the other side, let's do a little extension. So we'll do kind of some baby cobra breaststroke prep mashup. So don't feel like you have to be too narrow with your hands. It's really easy to get kind of squished in with the mats. So have your hands wide enough that you feel like you can move your shoulders. I'm gonna press down with the tops of my feet. So my glutes and hamstrings are on to protect my low back. My core is also engaged. I'm gonna lift my shoulder blades first. So shoulder blades lift, ribs lift, and then my head's the last thing to come up. And I don't wanna look totally straight forward. Gonna strain my neck, but maybe like a foot in front of you. And then lengthen back down in the same sequence. So shoulder blades, and then I undulate the rest of my spine up. Again, if you wanna make this a little more exciting, you can get rid of the hands. So I might just lift. Good kind of in between if you're not quite ready to go full hands. Use the support on the way up, and then float, and then control the lower back down. Right, take a couple more like this. So we know that we build more strength eccentrically. So a really good way to kind of build the gap is use the support for the first part, float up, and then work the control on the lower. And that's a really great way. Make sure the glutes are still on, you're still breathing. We're gonna do just one more here. And then we'll push back. So find your abs. You can move your hands a little lower. And then take about 3 breaths in a child's pose. Keep it pretty active. So, right, really scooping low core as you're pushing with the arms. Maybe you can get the top of the head to come down onto the mat. And then walking the hands back here. We're gonna come onto hands and knees and do just a little bird dog. So check in that rotation of the arms. Right, we've got our nice stack. When you're ready, so pushing out of the ground, my core is really active. I can either touch or I can float, kind of depending on where I'm feeling. And then bringing it back in. It's all about, can I keep my trunk stable? So this is oblique work. This is trunk stabilization. I mean, it's everything. It's one of the best exercises, in my opinion, on the planet, because you're getting a little bit of everything. So you're getting shoulders, hips, right, back extensors, core. Try one more each way. Just make sure you're still breathing, keeping the neck nice and long. Nice, and then we're just gonna slide down to the opposite side for our glutes. So I'm gonna do my left side. Just make sure you do your opposite if you didn't do the same prescription. Whatever's most comfortable for the side of your head. So, right, you're asymmetrical. You might find that you want different padding on each side, and that's totally cool. Go for your kind of gentle clamshell legs. Bottom obliques are on, push that top hip away, and then we're gonna float up. And so if you had an imaginary line kind of drawn from the bottom knee to the ceiling, your leg is gonna follow that line. And if you notice your shin is working a lot, relax your foot, find your hand to the kind of that outer hip and make sure that it's core and outer hip that are initiating for you. Your shin sometimes likes to get a little bit involved in this one. A little bit of core to protect the low back and the neck. We're gonna hold on this next one. So we'll float up to hip height here. You're gonna turn the thigh in. So keep the hip really steady, maybe a hand on the hip. And then you're gonna turn the knee up, foot down. And this will always be a little bit harder if we're gripping through the bum, or again, if that bottom side oblique kind of falls, we'll have a little bit less range of motion. So keep that top side long. And we'll take a couple more like this. And just like nice fluid breath. You shouldn't feel like you have to really coordinate a specific breath for this. Breathing into the back and the side of the body. Let's just do one more set. And then you can lengthen that leg out, give it a little, thank you. And then let's roll onto our back and we're gonna do a couple full roll-ups. So full roll-up prep if you're not ready for kind of the leg long version, and maybe your back doesn't prefer it. So, you know, if bent legs feels better in your back, you can always do bent legs. You're gonna reach arms to the ceiling. Now you're gonna use this momentum and you can grab the backs of your legs to come up all the way. And there might be like a various degree of bend that's preferable. And then you can use your arms on the way back down and kind of try to go as slow as possible, because again, this is a really great place to build strength. So this combination of arms pressing and exhaling that's gonna help get you up. And I would say, yeah, really nice, exactly. Take advantage of the momentum on that moment and then go as slow as possible on the way back down. And if you're ready for straight legs, like if you're like, oh, I feel pretty comfortable, I've done roll up a lot, then straight legs, I'd go slow. So that's how we're gonna challenge it, is can you take away all of the momentum? And remember, we're looking for articulation. Feel free to go for that stretch by all means. Get that hamstring moment. So we want to find if there's any place in our full roll up where it kind of like, maybe it's really smooth, clunk, really smooth. See if you can smooth out that part that's a little bit more challenging. And we'll just do two more like this and we'll finish up at the top. Exhaling is a really key component. So I like to kind of inhale here and then exhale over the hump, so to speak. So that really tricky moment, if you can get the exhale to initiate in that moment. And then easy shoulders, right? Take your arms with you. So if you find your shoulders in your ears, just kind of relax those guys, maybe even just crossing your arms. And then we'll pause at the top here, and we're gonna do a little more ab work, surprise. So we're gonna come down onto our, it's like we're doing Pilates or something. So we'll come, if you're in an arch, you're gonna rotate the pelvis slightly. So we're gonna start with our legs in tabletop, right? If you need to bias and pull them in a little bit more, if that helps support you right in your back, that's okay. We're gonna extend one leg out, bring that leg in, and then try the other side. So exhaling. Right now you decide. Lower is gonna be a little more challenging. Just moving one at a time. Watch out for this leg doing something else. So pretty standard procedure choreographically. We're gonna reverse it the next time that our right leg is out. So you're gonna reach your right leg out, pause, reach your left leg out. Bring your right leg in, reach your right leg out. So now we're meeting on the diagonal. So we've just reversed the sequence. So this should feel like a little more core work now. So higher if it's easier, right? Exhale when your legs are extended. So inhale when your leg comes in. Can you curl up a little bit more in your upper abdominals? Nice. You get one more each way. And then pull your legs in one at a time. You can lower your legs back down. We're gonna do another round, but we'll stop for a little shoulder bridge. So you're gonna roll all the way down, bring your feet in a little closer. So we're just gonna press the hips up and down like 4 times without articulation. So I'm pressing up, opening the hips right away, knees tracking over toes, just watching I'm not overextending in the ribs. So pressure on the neck will be a good guide. As if you got karate chopped at your hip joint, just set your bum back down. So exhale to press, and then karate chop at the hips, setting the bum back down. Just 2 more like that. Oop, that was a little high. And last one. Nice, so we're gonna come up on the next one. We're gonna stay and we're gonna take like 8 marches. So I'm gonna press up. Here's the idea, right? Just like our bird dog, stable pelvis. So nothing changes when I float a leg to tabletop and then I float that leg back down and try the other side. So what will help is thinking about prepping the supporting leg before you lift. So if I can think about, okay, left glute is like really pressing into my heel. I've really got that inner thigh on. Now I can lift my right leg. So you can take kind of a moment to make sure. And then sometimes it's just fun to try it. Like just lift and see, okay, if I have that intention, my muscles oftentimes will just kind of jump in for me to support. So I've got 2 more here. And then you can roll it all the way back down. Nice, so we're gonna reach the arms overhead, lengthen the feet a little bit away. We're gonna come all the way back up, so another roll up here. We're gonna come back down to our forearms for kind of round 2 of the elbow ab. Because we really were like, let's do that again today. So you're gonna roll your pelvis back, right? If you start sinking here, think of it in 2 ways. Your abs are working kind of together. So the more I can push up and curl my upper abs and then pull my lower abs in, it's like circle of ab, I'll have more support. I'll flip my legs one at a time to tabletop, right? You can always pull in a little if you need. So for this one, I'm going to switch like a scissor, but I've got my legs bent. So both legs are moving. And if this starts to feel good, you can start to extend it out a little bit more. Exhaling to switch. So the further my legs are away, right, obviously the more challenging. Can you keep the weight even? Nice, try 2 more like this. And then we're gonna pause. So come back to tabletop. So you're gonna extend one leg out and then extend your second leg out. Exhaling, right, choose your height. Higher is gonna be a little bit easier, lower is gonna be a little harder. I'm gonna exhale to lower one leg and bring it back. Exhale, inhale back. So I'm just staying out on that diagonal. Try to resist that leg scissoring now. So kind of requiring the opposite. And we'll do 4 more. Can you curl up a little higher? Can you rotate your pubic bone away from your thighs? You get 1 more each way. How's your neck? We'll turn your head from side to side here. And then carefully bend one leg in, your second leg in. Nice, then you can rock all the way up. Yay. All right, a little bit of side glute work. So we'll come onto our knees. We're gonna measure this one out. If you wanna do any knee padding choreography here, you're welcome to. So let's do our right leg as supporting first. So we'll bring our left leg out to the side. And then take kind of a hinge back and use your glute like you just did in your shoulder bridge and push your hip forward, right? So when you're hinging back, my glute is gonna push, that's the impetus for pushing me forward. So I found my glute, so now it's like on and we feel it, right? It's nice and stable. So you're gonna bring your hands behind your head and then extending through the top leg, I'm gonna exhale as I reach out, keep the glute on, don't lose the glute, and then inhale to come back up. So side reach, really watch the low back here. It's really easy to arch in this one. Exhaling and inhaling, pushing down through that supporting leg, outer hip and glute. Yeah, if you wanna make this harder, what could you do? Extend your arms out, right? Longer lever. Just go to where you're about to touch, but not quite. And we'll do 2 more like this. It's a little oblique glute stabilization. You can always keep the chin tucked a little bit. We're gonna stay on this next one, so I'm gonna kind of timber to the side. I wanna make sure where my hand is, that my shoulder is gonna be over my wrist and my hip can still be over my knee. So gonna check out that. If the hip kind of folds again, press it forward a little bit. Yeah, nice. You're gonna bring that hand behind your head, float your leg up. Okay, so some glute work, right? So I'm gonna pull my knee and my elbow together as close as I can, right? There might be a little bit of a gap, that's okay. Extend the leg out, keep your leg lifted, and then rotate your elbow down towards your supporting arm. And lift up, so easy breath. Exhaling, bring the knee and the elbow together, extend out, keep that leg lifted. Exhaling, bringing your elbow towards that supporting arm. Yeah, nice, we're gonna do 2 more like that. Finding that crunch, has that bottom hip. Can you keep the leg at the same height? So notice if that leg starts to drop, you get 1 more. Nice, easy exhale. And then you can lower that leg, take a nice side stretch over. So just releasing that arm, play here with maybe making some big arm circles, sweeping around, opening your chest to the ceiling. Maybe you reverse the arm circle. You know, whatever feels good. This is like your exploratory movement moment. And then we're gonna come back to hands and knees. And we're gonna do our same side, bird dog. So a little break in between. So for this one, I'm gonna push so strongly through, so I'm weighting through my left arm and left glute that I can start to float up my hand. Maybe my foot stays on the ground. Maybe I can float the whole side up. And then can I lower back down without crashing? And I'll just try alternating that. We're gonna do 8 of these. So it's pushing, pushing, pushing. Here's that supporting. Maybe this is where I am right now, right? That's okay. Maybe I feel like I can float all the way up and look. Maybe I can reach my arm and leg away from one another, right? So keep in mind, it's like longer lever, but I really want you to practice the lower with control. So it might get a little wobbly, right? That's part of what is cool about balance, is like regaining balance. Can I really push out of my supporting limbs and rotate my shoulder blade to come back down? And you'll notice, here's that retraction that we did right at the very beginning. So even though I'm loading it, I'm still getting retraction through my shoulder blades. Yeah. And for the last 2, challenge yourself to breathe the whole time. Just smooth breath. It's like, can I breathe with my balance? So I think one of the hardest things when we start to concentrate, the breath kind of leaves the building. But it'll become a little easier. It'll be like less strenuous. You'll notice the tension kind of disappears when you can breathe the whole time. Yeah, and even like having that point at the end or point at the beginning where it's like, yeah, remember, breathe right here. And then we'll come up to the other side here and we'll do our glutes on the opposite side. So bringing that leg out. I've got my right leg out, supporting on my left, and then finding that hip crease. So I'm breaking out my hip joint, toes long or tucked, whatever feels better. Use your glute. There's my shoulder bridge. So there's my bum. It's just like coming up on a squat, right? So I'm finding that glute squeeze. You guys can face each other. and then you can have your hands behind your head. And we're gonna take our little reach. So I wanna use the strength of my hips here. If I can use my hip strength, right, all this action, this becomes so much more supported. So use your outer glute, use your supporting hip, right? You're gonna feel maybe a little more flexed forward so that you don't arch. We're still in a straight line, but just notice it's really easy to flare the ribs. Yeah, and maybe you wanna make it harder, you can do arms out, you can keep the arms more supportive. Maybe tucking the chin. It's kind of like our ab work in general, right, in any plane becomes way easier when our hips are working with us too. So that's kind of our whole core stability is the whole trunk. Try 2 more like this. Exhaling and inhaling. Do you guys have one side that's easier? Like this side feels really easy. The other side was a little, maybe my third side is the best. Okay, so we're gonna find that stack of shoulder, right? Find the wrist position that helps you open up your shoulder. My hip is still forward, so find that glute. We're gonna float the top leg up. So first I'm gonna pull knee and elbow together. Now I can't get them to touch, so don't worry if you can't either. And then we're gonna round, keep that leg floating, try to reach that elbow towards the opposite elbow. And then coming in, exhaling, we're just gonna do 3 more here. Keep that leg reaching. So the more the leg reaches and the supporting hip works, the less weight is gonna be on that shoulder, right? Between shoulder and the hips are probably our bigger and stronger muscle. So we'll try to utilize them as much as we can. Last one here, rolling down. Nice, then you can lower that leg, take a nice big stretch, right? Maybe all you wanna do is just breathe in this. Maybe you wanna play with those arm circles, kind of whatever is calling to you. And then we'll rotate all the way back. So we'll cross our ankles, one more little ab thing, and then we'll do a little more extension. All right. So roll it back here, nice and controlled all the way down. We're gonna do a little low core business. So we'll come into our imprint position, ribs and hips drawing together to keep that back connected, pubic bones rotating towards our chest. We're gonna float one leg at a time into our tabletop. So we're gonna start with a bicycle leg, but we're gonna go a little more quickly here. So as I extend one leg, the opposite leg comes in. So we've been doing our single leg stretch variation. This one's a little faster. Can you cue your glutes on? So can you find your hips working for you here? If you wanna make this a little harder, you're welcome to clasp your hands behind your head and float your upper body up. We'll take about 4 more like this. Just do a nice little like core burnout here. Last 2. Last 1. Next time your right leg comes in, you're gonna reach your right leg to the ceiling, left leg long. We're gonna inhale and exhale to switch, little scissor, right? So you can do head down. If you want a little assistance, you can always kind of aid that top leg if you're feeling a little tight. If you have your head up and you wanna make it more challenging, just float those arms. We'll go for 4 more here. 4, how's that imprint? 3, 2, 1, you're gonna bend your legs into tabletop. So I'm gonna reach my hands towards my shins. Now if your head is down, you might not quite be able to reach all that way, that's okay. And then we're gonna sweep the arms and legs in opposition, keeping your imprint, and then exhale to wrap everything back in. So sweeping the arms, right? I'm either holding my ab prep the whole time, or my head's just staying down and it's arms and legs reaching away. Either way, adjust the height of your legs to keep your back in a good position. Let's go for 3 more here. Legs don't have to go fully straight. Last 1. Nice, and you can lengthen your left leg long and pull your right thigh into your chest. Give it a nice little squeeze here. And we'll clasp our hands behind our right thigh, keeping that left leg long. If you need a little more support in the low back, you can always bend it. Flex your right heel and take a couple knee pumps to the ceiling. So the idea is I'm gonna pull my thigh in as close as possible and I'm holding it. So whether or not your knee goes straight doesn't really matter. It's can you use your arms to keep that thigh still in space? So you should get a nice little stretch through that posterior chain. So maybe it's foot, calf, back of knee, maybe it's all the way down to your low back. Try 1 more like this. Nice, and then you can exchange your legs here. So lengthen that right leg long, draw your left leg in, give it a nice little squeeze. Really reaching through that right leg, especially activating through the back line so the front of your hip can open. And then clasp your hands the opposite way here behind your left thigh, flex that foot, and see if you can keep the left thigh really stable. So again, whether or not that leg straightens, not too much of a worry. If you ever get sciatica, this is a really great stretch to do. And we're gonna gain more when it's an active mobilization versus just like a passive stretch. Passive stretches can feel really nice, which is great. But if we want real kind of structural change, try one more like this. And then you can lengthen that leg long and then just roll onto your front here. Do a little bit more extension. So we'll do a couple flying squirrel floats. They feel great. So with our arms down by our sides, and you can rest one cheek on the ground. So I'm gonna press down through the tops of my feet to get my glutes and hamstrings on, my core's on. Kind of my first move as I adjust my head to face the ground is that my shoulder blades come up. So my arms are hovering even if I'm not necessarily in a big extension, and then everything else can come off the ground and extend. And then I'm gonna lengthen back down and switch sides. And just take a nice breath in when you lift. If you find you need an exhale for more support, switch the breathing. I'm keeping essentially the points of my floating ribs and my hip bones down on the ground. So it's not really a big back bend. It's more about activating everything in my posterior chain. And you can always try one because sometimes it's good for the kind of the nervous system to learn the muscle memory. If I don't let my shoulder blades lift and I try to float, my neck's gonna be really strained. I'm not gonna come up very far. I'm gonna be really locked up. If I can find my shoulder blades plugging towards my spine, it really opens up the front of my chest, right? So that's external rotation of the arm bones. And we'll just try one more like this. Thinking about the rotation of your hands can be helpful too. So having your hands rotate towards your thighs or even towards the ground, so kind of spinning in and out. And then we'll bring our hands back to our ribs and press back, take a child's pose. We're gonna add a little lateral stretch here. So whether you have knees together or apart, walk your hands over to the right and then push yourself. So I'm really actively stretching that whole left side body. My weight's gonna fall a little bit towards my left sit bone. If you can't get your head to the ground, that's okay. Maybe you bring your right hand in and make a fist, or bring the hand under the head too, and that can be a nice little way to kind of offset the neck tension. You find that you're having to hold your head up. And then on this next breath, just moving your hands over to the opposite side. So pushing with my right, I'm gonna shift my weight over. Again, I can always rest my head on my hand. I should feel a pretty active and big stretch through that right side body. Maybe all the way to the low back. And then coming back to center for one more breath. And starting to walk the hands back here, kind of supporting. We're gonna do a little thread the needle. So kind of going back to the very first thing we did, that little shoulder blade retraction. So I'm gonna sweep my left fingertips out. So I'm pushing with my supporting arm to lengthen that arm up. And then I'm gonna sweep it all the way through. We're just gonna do that 2 more times. So pushing through my hips, using that arm, shoulder blades allowing me to rotate. Easy breath here. You can always bias that weight a little bit back into the hips for more support. So on the next one, we'll stay. So I'm gonna rest my left ear on the ground. Now, if I want a little more support, I can adjust my right arm. So maybe I bring it a little higher up. The idea is I wanna try to twist my torso towards the right. So I'm really looking here. And I can use that arm to assist a little bit more of a stretch through the shoulder blade. And I can adjust my arm back so I've got a little more support again. Find your core, find your hips. And then unfurl one more time. And then we'll try the other side. So a little reset here. I'm gonna push out of my supporting arms. There's my initial retraction as I sweep up. And then I'm gonna sweep through. Nice breath in, using your eyes. Right, so again, kind of noticing that our cervical spine and thoracic spine motion can be kind of inhibited or increased by using our focus. And we'll sweep it through this last time and we'll just stay. So you're gonna rest your right shoulder, your right ear on the ground. And I can adjust this. So maybe I just want a little more support. Maybe I want more of a stretch. So maybe I reach my arm all the way up and kind of push to rotate my chest to the left. And just a couple easy breaths here. And then when you're ready, bringing that hand back, find that nice support, and you're gonna unfurl one more time. And bring that arm down, and then let's cross our legs. We'll come to a seat for a moment. We'll do a little hip stretch. So I've got my left thigh down, kind of in like a, I'm gonna sit crisscross. I'm gonna bring my right heel and I'm gonna hook it over. So my right bum is probably off the ground. I'm gonna see if I can put it back down. It's gonna sit on both sits bones equally, and I can tuck my feet in as much as I want. Whatever's more comfortable, so reaching under, reaching over, I'm gonna draw that leg towards my chest as I press my tailbone down. So there's your outer hip stretch, is the more I pull this leg in, but press down in opposition. So I'm really kind of forcibly weighting my right cheek, essentially. If you wanna add the rotation, you can, maybe rotating towards the thigh, but it's really more of a, I would say, more effective hip stretch. And then you can sweep that leg out, give your legs a little like wiggle in and out for a moment, and then we'll just exchange. So we'll go right leg in, so here's my crisscross. My left heel is gonna hook over, and I can always adjust. Feet a little closer, left bum down. I'm gonna draw that knee in as I press more weight into that tailbone. Yeah, and you're always welcome to like sit up on a cushion if you want a little more height. You could lengthen this leg long if the knee doesn't like that flexion. Another good option. You can add the twist if you want. You're gonna twist towards that front thigh, but really think about pressing down as you pull that thigh. That's gonna give you some good external hip stretch. And then last but not least, we'll just bring the feet together, a little butterfly here. And for this, you can play with maybe like moving a little bit side to side if it feels good to extend the hips forward, right? So hip stretch would be more of me creasing at my hip bones and trying to keep my sits bones really open versus kind of rounding down for a little bit of a spine stretch here. And just take about 3 breaths, kind of exploring this, if it feels good to move in it, if it feels good to just kind of hang out for those 3 breaths. And I'll leave you guys there. Thank you. Yay. Thanks for joining. Thank you, guys.